In order to have better quality friends and to find friends you really like and connect with, you need to be a more specific niche person. You need to start with yourself. You need to have the courage to be yourself, and you need to do the things that you genuinely like, even if they make you feel like a weirdo or are a little bit off the beaten path, because that is where you will find your people. Okay, everyone, welcome back to The Hot Thought. I'm your host and therapist friend, Liv Yoon, and this is a podcast for women navigating their early 20s and all of the challenges and themes that come in between with it, from friendships and dating, career, confidence. And as your therapist friend, it's my job to bestow all the wisdom that I get from my friends, from my own experiences, and bestow that wisdom onto you guys. So let's get into it. Today, I am reporting live, not actually live, because when you guys see this, it'll be a little bit later than that. But I am in my London flat. I moved in about 2 weeks ago. I'm staying in this really lovely area called Marylebone, and I've been really liking London so far. We are actually in the middle of this big heat wave situation, European, especially in London, but I think this is pretty common in Europe. There's not a lot of AC systems built into the buildings because a lot of them are really old, because Europe's really old. And so now it's just me and my fan battling through this weather. I got an iced oat latte with vanilla and this banana bread I'll be munching on. Oh my god, you can't see it, but my room is kind of a mess. It's banana bread from this bakery that's a 2-minute walk from my flat that I really love. Yeah, so I'll be enjoying that and waking up a little bit while I talk to you guys. Some of you guys have been asking, why did I even come to London in the first place? And I'll give you a little bit of that lore and backdrop before I get into today. So I, for the longest time, wanted to study abroad in London. I've always been someone who was really drawn to London and just loved the culture. I grew up playing soccer, so they have a huge, or it's called football here, but I grew up playing soccer, love their soccer culture here. I've always kind of felt like it was this little bit of an alternate universe that I've always wanted to live in. So I finally got the chance to do it. What I loved about studying abroad when I was in Sydney was that I felt like I got to build my own life in a different country. I got my own routine. I made my own friends. And there's something so freeing about just going to a new country, going to a new city where no one really knows you that well, and just doing whatever you want. While I didn't study abroad in London, I chose to go to Sydney instead. This is kind of my little London study abroad situation before I start my job in September. So I'm just kind of vibing, having fun. I'm meeting other creators and just making friends. And that is actually what I wanted to talk about today on this episode, which is friends and making friends. Not just making new friends, but making quality friends, because I think it is something that girls can struggle with a lot, even though we're kind of known as the gender that's very community based and has great connections. Well, I think that's true. I think a lot of girls go through periods in their life, especially early 20s, late teens, this kind of stage that I'm in, where we're trying to figure out who our people are and really building those quality friendships that we see in the TV shows and that we all crave. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think a lot of us do. I'm going to be talking about the methods and the ways that a lot of us tend to go about making friends, and share my perspective on how I make friends and a shift I had to make in order to start making really deeper quality friendships. So let's get into it. Okay, so what I kind of like to explain to people is that when we are in middle school, in high school, in college, we go about making friends in kind of this scarcity mindset, if that makes sense. If you think about it, in your middle school grade, for me, there was 200 kids roughly. So those are the 200 kids. You gotta choose from those kids, right? Those are your friends. And similarly, I mean, it looks a little bit different, and you definitely have more freedom the more you get older. But I think a lot about when I went to college and I joined a sorority, there was a finite number of girls that were in my sorority. And what often happens, and what we're kind of told to do from a young age, is find people that you like, that are good people, that are nice, that you vibe with, and then make friends with them, get to know them, spend time with them. And that's a great way to make people. On paper, that all seems great. But what I think tends to happen in those situations is we end up kind of adjusting accordingly to fit into this friend group or to fit into this sort of social setting, simply because there are not a lot of people and this is where we see ourselves fit in the best. And usually it's not like 100% we're fitting in with these people. So the parts that we feel like maybe don't fit in as much or are a little bit different, we kind of push off to the side or we adjust accordingly. And the thing and the biggest change, the biggest switch I had to flip in my head was, instead of leading with other people and then adjusting myself accordingly, I had to flip that. I had to lead with myself and then adjust with people accordingly. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of us will just put ourselves in groups, whether we meet them early on in school and orientation, whether they're in our class together, whether it's convenient for us, and then try to make friends with them. And by doing that, what we tend to do is change ourselves a little bit so that we can be friends with these people. And what I argue is that in order to make better quality friendships, you need to start with yourself. And what I mean by that is making friends in a slightly different way. You need to lead with yourself, meaning you need to pursue your passions, your hobbies, your interests. Do what you like, do what calls to you, do the clubs in school that call to you, regardless of what other people are doing. And naturally, you'll start to find people that are like-minded in those more niche spaces. And then those are going to be your better quality friends, because those are people that are more like you, that have similar mindsets, that chose to join this club for a reason, or chose to be in this organization, or study this thing for a reason, or play this sport for a reason. And there's a much higher likelihood that you have something in common. And that is how I have been able to find my best friendships, even in as early as middle school and high school. Always really liked to play soccer. Like, soccer was one of my biggest passions growing up. And so I made a lot of my great friends by joining soccer teams, by joining a club, playing on our high school team. And these were also girls that had a similar passion for soccer and all of the elements that go with it, like teamwork, like working for something really hard, discipline, things like that. And therefore, we just had more in common. And as you get older, you can get a lot more specific with these things, right? For me, for example, I'm someone who is very creative. Obviously, I do a lot of content creation. And one of my best friends from college is someone who is pursuing film. So it's a little bit different, but we really bonded over like these big artistic projects and pursuits that we were working on. And a lot of people at Penn weren't necessarily doing that either. So that's how we were able to find each other, because we were both doing our own thing. And honestly, I think because we both have really strong sense of ourselves, we're able to forge a much deeper quality friendship than I had maybe in high school or middle school. So long story short, what I think you need to do is listen to yourself, do what genuinely calls to you and excites you, and then just find other people like you, right? Find other weirdos like you, whether that's people who also really like theater and they're just total nerds about it, and so are you. And they're probably going to be better friends for you than a group of girls that you might not have as much in common about. Okay, I think a great example of this is in New York City. I've talked about this a lot with my siblings who have lived in New York City for quite some time, especially my sister. A great way to make friends in New York City is by following your hobbies. There's a lot of spaces, especially in any big city, not just New York, of course. I've been able to find this in London as well. There are many spaces, clubs, events, anything you can think of for people with the niche interests that you have. If you're really active, you can find a run club. You can go rock climbing. You can become one of those people. I know a lot of people who have converted. You can start kickboxing. You can try martial arts. You can literally do whatever calls to you. And chances are, in a big city with a lot of people, there will be other people that are putting themselves out there that want to try something new, that are doing something that's calling to them, that you can be friends with. And what I also like to say is that every hobby, every interest calls to and is attractive to different people, because there are certain things about that hobby or that discipline or whatever it is that calls to a certain type of person. So for example, that I use with soccer, I think soccer for me was in so many ways like meditative and cathartic, because I had a lot of like pent up emotions. I had a lot of stuff in my personal life that wasn't great, and soccer was such a great way for me to get out my emotions, get out my anger, focus on something, connect with my teammates, and like physically work together towards a common goal. There's something very specific about team sports and soccer and things like that. And for a lot of my teammates, I know they related to that aspect a lot. Like, it was very much a way for them to, I guess, like heal in many ways, or just like a great distraction or pause in their life. Like, it was very good for their well-being. And similarly to how I feel with content creation, a lot of my friends from content, or a lot of my friends that are pursuing something that's maybe more entrepreneurial or creative, find that they were drawn to these things because they felt like maybe they didn't want to do a corporate job for the rest of their life, or maybe they are really creative and have this deep passion that they know they can't ignore. And so if you have this instinctual calling or like gut feeling to pursue something or try your hand at something, there's a reason why you feel that way. And there will be other people that similarly have had those life experiences or feelings that will go to that. And then you have a higher chance of being friends, if that makes sense. Like minded people will go to the same niches and hobbies and spaces. And those people are more likely to be people that you can form deeper connections with because they have more in common with you. There's a reason why they also came to that thing, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Once again, as I'm saying, being yourself, being more like yourself, being more true to yourself will attract the right people, right? You have to just be yourself and let the people come to you. And I think from a young age, as I was saying, we're kind of taught to do the opposite, right? Like go to the people and then not really be yourself, like turn yourself into someone that can fit in with the people or be part of the people. And so my big thesis argument here is that we got to flip that. We're doing it in the wrong order. However, this does require a certain level of understanding of yourself and the courage to be yourself, which is not easy. It can take a while and it can take a lot of work to have the courage to be yourself and to really understand like who you are and what you value and why you want to pursue certain things, right? Because I think where a lot of us start is like, wow, there's so many things out there. I don't even know where to begin. I remember in high school, I went to this like club fair and I was like, there are a million things that I feel like I could join. There are a million things that I feel like I could do. And I kind of felt frozen because I had so many options, but zero idea of where I wanted to go. And what I'm going to argue here is that place where a lot of us get stuck is kind of how I was in high school for a little bit at that career fair. There were so many options that I felt quite frozen and I didn't feel confident enough to even just go in one direction. What I started doing in college that really helped me discover myself more and eventually find the niche hobbies and interests that have made me some of my best friends. Writing everything down on a list that I might have been interested in and then just going, trying all of them, every single one of them, and then crossing it off if I didn't like it, right? I tried so many things in high school, in college. I remember my freshman year, I was in so many clubs. I was in Taekwondo club. I was in the queer and Asian club. I was in the queer club. I was in the Asian club. I was in our school newspaper. I was studying this, but I was also taking classes about this. I was in like 4 different friend groups. Like I was everywhere trying different things and just pretty much collecting data points. I would try something out, really give it a try. And if I liked it, great. If I didn't, all right, that's more information. Not liking something is a great piece of information. For example, I thought for a while with my career, I was really confused. Like I thought I wanted to maybe go into politics. Imagine that. I was someone who really cared about other people, about helping other people. And so I thought that maybe I was going to be a lawyer. Maybe I was going to work in policy or in like local government. And then I quickly realized I didn't want to do that. I took my economics class. I took my first politics class and I was like, this isn't for me. Okay. And then I was like, you know what? I love to write. I've always loved to write. Maybe I'll be a journalist. Okay. Because I can still help people. And there's a great like moral duty of journalism. And it's combining another one of my interests. I tried being a beat reporter. I tried writing news segments. I did this in high school too. I realized not for me, not for me. That wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I kept crossing things off my list until eventually I had a much better sense of what I liked, what I didn't like, what I could tolerate, what truly fulfilled me, and what I felt like I was really good at. And that is actually how I came across content creation. I just kept trying shit. My sophomore year, I joined this content creation club at Penn. It was really just me throwing another spaghetti on the wall to see what hit. And it hit. I finally got my target. What a lot of people don't see, a lot of people will be like, wow, like I feel like you're so confident in your path and you know exactly what you're doing. And you're coming out of college and it seems like you have your shit together with your career. You know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly what your goals are in life. And I do. That's true. But that's only because I had tried so many different things. And by trying so many different things, I was able to learn so much more about myself, have the courage to be myself, and then find friends that were like-minded. So it starts with yourself. It starts with just trying things, honestly. I really believe that. I always say that who people are friends with say a lot about them. I think the people you surround yourself with are very much a reflection of yourself because it is the environment that you willingly put yourself in and choose to be in every day. When I look at the environments I used to put myself in, I reflect on it. And I think in those moments, or I think in those times, I can tell just how lost I was about my identity. Even when I was like in some of my like youngest friend groups from grade school, from middle school and high school, like it was a version of myself that hadn't figured out so much about herself. I mean, even looking at myself now, I can tell just how much I've changed and how much better I know myself. And that took work. It took work, it took putting myself out there, but I do think it's kind of a process. And it all kind of ties into each other because the more you know yourself, the more you try things and collect data points, put yourself out there, the more you're going to meet better friends. And then the more you meet better friends, the more you'll know yourself and you'll keep trying things. And it's kind of this like, it all snowballs and plays into each other. So I think this is the wavelength a lot of us need to be on. And here's another caveat that actually, I think it was my mom who told me when I was very young. And I've taken this with me throughout so much of my life. And this is a piece of advice I give to a lot of my friends as well. And it's that not every friend will fit into every aspect of your life. In fact, you don't want every friend to fit into every aspect of your life. And here's what I mean by this. I used to have this like false or like unrealistic expectation for friends. And I used to think that my true best friends, like the real one, my tight circle, my top tier friends would be the ones that I could do everything with. I could go out with them. I could have a really deep conversations with them. I could work out with them. I could study with them, do work with them, do professional things with them. But I could also like around and go out and drink and have fun with them. And I do think there are certain people that those people are rare. And if you do find them, hold them tight. They're great. But that is not going to be every single friend. And that is a really tall, unrealistic order to have for every single person in your life. I have friends that fit into different parts of my life, but they're not going to fill every single bucket in my life. For me, for example, I have friends that I love to go out with. You know, I love to be social with, I love to hang out with, maybe get a drink with, but maybe I don't really talk to them that much about like content creation or my marketing job or professional stuff or grades or even anything related to that. And then vice versa, I have content friends. Like friends that like we do our professional work together. We're on that wavelength, or other like entrepreneurial people. Like I mentioned, my friend from college, like people that we have similar interests with our professional lives and we've really bonded over that. But maybe I don't, go out with them. Or maybe I don't open up to them about like my family trauma or anything like that, because that might not be what their strong suit is. And that's totally okay. I think a lot of us have this idea in our heads that friends need to fulfill so much in our lives. They need to be able to do everything with us. Like they could just stick by our side 100%. And we even think that way with partners too. And I don't think that's how it should be. I think you have different buckets in your life. You have different aspects of your life that are important to you and that you should absolutely nurture. But I think it's unrealistic to expect people to fit into every piece of your life. And I actually argue that it's probably unhealthy. And you probably want to meet people that, hey, like they're also a content creator, but they really like I'm just I'm just thinking about my one friend. Like he's into film, but he also really likes to play the cello, right? And that's something like I haven't touched an instrument since I was 12, since I was like Asian kid forced to play the piano and like raged quit when I was 12. What I've been able to like learn from him is that there's a certain joy in discovery of like learning new things and in musical instruments. Like I've kind of rediscovered a love for music by having a friend that's different from me, that doesn't fit into every single aspect of my life and has different interests outside of just some sort of like creative entrepreneurial pursuit, right? So we connected originally on like a professional level, but he has other aspects of his life that I have found quite beneficial to my own life and have been able to learn through him. You never want to be in general in like a very homogenous setting. And once again, going back to the example of like this like scarcity mindset, leading with the people and then adjusting yourself friendship strategy that so many of us learn early on in grade school, in high school, in college, that is a recipe for hanging out with the exact same type of people. And just being in a homogenous echo chamber. That's exactly what you want to avoid. I mean, I do think there's complete value in having a space like that in your life where there are people like you, and that in itself is completely beneficial. But you do not want all of your friends, your partner, all the people in your life to be exactly like you. That is a big danger on so many levels, and I don't think that's good for anyone. I think that will absolutely stunt your growth as a person. I think that will make it a lot harder for you to figure out yourself and what you actually like and who you are as a person. And so what I always try to do, I always try to force myself to talk to people, to make friends with people, to meet people that are not like me. And those are probably some of your friends that will teach you the most about yourself, actually, and about the world. Okay, another point. We often have this archetype, this like ideal archetype of someone that we want to be friends with. For example, right? Like if I was thinking of like my dream friend, like my dream girlfriend, it would be like, oh, maybe she studied something like, I don't know, like some sort of humanities and she kind of has a cool sense of style. Maybe she's also got tattoos and piercings. She's working in a big city and I don't know, she's really intelligent and likes to have deep conversations, but she also likes to have a good time and go out. And I'm sure any girl like that would be one of my great friends. But some of the best friendships that I have forged in my entire life are people, once again, that are not like me, that don't fit this archetype. And I think this archetype of like our ideal friend or the people, if we're in a big crowd and we're trying to make friends with people, those are the people we're going to try and go to, right? This is another big thing with like dating apps, right? Like we're swiping and only liking people that fit our archetype of like a partner or someone that we're attracted to. But there's a danger in that because I think we often create this idea in our heads, and a lot of times there's a bit of a discrepancy or a bit of a difference in between who we might actually connect with and who we think we want to connect with. Okay, one small complaint about like London, or I think it's just like in the UK, like their iced drinks don't really have a lot of ice, which I know in the US it's like you want less ice because you get more of the drink, but my iced coffees always melt incredibly fast to the point where like 3/4 of the time that I'm drinking the coffee, it's just like a little bit watered down, but it still hits. I'm still happy. I keep going back to high school. I still think this is where like so many of us learn norms and expectations around friends. And I kind of want to just start, I just want to like dismantle a lot of them because I don't think they're the most productive, right? Going back to the archetypes, right? I'm just thinking like this is how my high school was like. I know it's different for everyone, but it was kind of in this like high school musical-y sense. If you know the movie and you know when they have that scene called Stick to the Status Quo and they're all going around and like the different like stereotypical friend groups are like having their little parts. Like there's the nerds who like to read. There's the jocks who like to play basketball. There's the theater kids. There's like the emo stoner skaters. I mean, actually, what a great song. The whole point of that scene is like you need to stick to what you know and you need to stay in your lane. And I always think about that one basketball player who liked to bake and he was like shamed for baking. I really hope that guy has found peace because what I would recommend for that guy to do is like bake, join a baking club, and he might meet other people that are like-minded and meet some of his best friends through like a baking club or like an event or whatever. But I think like my high school was like that. Like I was in a soccer friend group. Like we were the soccer friend group and that was it. And there were different friend groups based on like these very stereotypical like archetypes in high school. And so because they were so stringent and because they were very much based on like our hobbies and interests and like very like there was no room for crossover, there wasn't a lot of room for like forging deep relationships outside of that I think was such a big blueprint to how I approached relationships, even just in the beginning of college. Like I just found people that I felt like fit the archetype of the friends that I was supposed to have, and then just like adjusted myself accordingly and just tried to fit in. Especially over college, I really did a lot of work to untangle that in my head and start leading with myself. Thing about soccer, like there was always a huge creative side to me. I always like I took AP art, believe it or not, that's class. I wrote a lot for our school newspaper, wrote a lot of opinion pieces. Was really into like 2D art for a while and poetry. And those parts of myself I felt like were always a bit muted or not explored simply because I felt like there wasn't really a space or a place for me to do that. And through college, through all these clubs, through making a huge list of things I was interested in or thought I could be interested in or wanted to try, and just checking every single one off, figuring out what I didn't like, figuring out what I did like, I was able to really hone that part of myself that was creative and felt quite ignored in high school. And now that is what I really feel like it's what I'm leading with as a person when I make friends. But there are still parts about soccer like ambition and teamwork and connecting with others that I still lead with, but it just manifests in slightly different ways now. So it really just begins with yourself, a willingness to not stick to the status quo, a collection of data points about yourself, and over time, finding the spaces, and through those spaces, finding the people that you really connect with. Okay, and I'm gonna end this by also talking about what I think. Like, I'm talking a lot about quality friendships and deeper friendships, but what does that actually mean? Like, what is the difference between the type of friendships that I felt like were more surface level in my earlier life versus a lot of the friendships I have now that I feel very deeply in touch with? So, as I've been saying throughout this entire podcast, I felt like I see it very much as like this kind of like funnel. Like, I started really wide with all my interests and who I was and who I was friends with, but the wider I was, the less deep my friendships were. And then over time, I've been able to narrow it down. So it's kind of like this funnel situation. It gets quite thinner. The more specific I've become as a person, the more sure of myself I become as a person, the less friends I have. Actually, that's not true. Never mind. But the more friends, or no, the more specific I've gotten as a person, the more I've gotten to know myself as a person, the deeper my friendships have gotten. And I think it all really comes back to the fact that the more specific you are in your passions, in your hobbies, in what you do in your everyday life, the more intentional you are, the more you're going to find people that are like you. Okay. So there's something that I find is like a common thread throughout a lot of like creative entrepreneurial people, such as a content creator. And it's this deep seated idea in ourselves that many of us have had from a young age, that we feel like, why does someone even start content creation in the first place, right? Like, why do you pick up your phone, start consistently making videos and putting it on the internet, right? That requires some sort of thought process in someone's head. For me, it was that I always knew that I didn't want to follow this like super stringent path that I felt like I was supposed to be on in life. I've always been drawn to like self-expression and was really always looking for something that called for me. And I discovered content creation and started actually building up the confidence to see myself as a content creator and not just as like some person, right? Because I always felt like a bit of an imposter, or that like it wasn't like I didn't see myself doing it seriously. And that kind of feeling of like something in my everyday life isn't feeling complete, and therefore like I'm gonna go pick up my phone and make content, right? Like there's that feeling and that theme in our lives that we want to go off maybe on a different path than what a lot of people are on. And that feeling is like a shared experience between so many content creators, so many creative people. And that even just like that experience has allowed me to connect with a lot of those people on deeper levels and form different friendships. I talked about soccer, right? A lot of people are called to certain sports or certain physical activities. I can't run for my life, but I know people who like love running, love those marathons, love those halves, love just like getting up, going on like whatever mile run. And I am sure there is something about running that heals them or feels very cathartic or feels like it really calls to them. Like there's a reason why these people are getting up at 7 a.m. to run like 10 miles, right? I haven't felt that feeling in my life, but that feeling by my philosophy, that feeling is most likely shared by all those runners, or like some sort of reason why they're getting up at 7 a.m. every morning to run all that miles. So, and to me, those like deeper, more specific feelings are exactly what has deepened the quality of my friendships. Because I feel like I'm seen by these people that I make friends with now in a way that many other people can't see me. I talked to one of my good friends who did theater growing up, and theater is like in high school, it's notoriously like this outcast group. And so many people have found such deep friendships through doing things like theater, through doing things like the performing arts, because maybe it was made fun of or looked down upon when they were growing up and they felt like a bit of an outcast. And that's a shared experience that a lot of people in performing arts have. And that shared experience has allowed them to deepen the quality of their friendships. So really, I keep coming back to this, but it just begins with starting with yourself and having the courage to genuinely listen to yourself, because it might feel like no one around you is feeling the things that you're feeling or called to the things that you're called to. There are absolutely people out there. I don't even know you personally, but I can tell you with my full heart, look you dead in the eye and say, there are people out there. There are absolutely people out there that are feeling the feelings you're feeling. And it's your job to go find the spaces where those people congregate. And that is by listening to yourself and doing what you want to do, even if it feels like you're being a weirdo or if other people aren't doing it. That's your job. It's a little bit in your hands. It requires self-work. It requires you doing something. Those friends are not going to come to you. The deep ones, the real quality ones, you got to work for them. And that's what makes them so special. Maybe I'll start doing the hot thought at the end of the episodes, because then I'll have like truly parsed it all out. Because sometimes I need to yap about it to like really set in stone what I believe the hot thought to be. But okay, today's hot thought is that in order to have better quality friends and to find friends you really like and connect with, you need to be more specific. You need to be a more specific niche person. You need to start with yourself. You need to have the courage to be yourself, and you need to do the things that you genuinely like, even if they make you feel like a weirdo or are a little bit off the beaten path, because that is where you will find your people. That is the thesis of this podcast. That is the episode for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed this new setting of my flat. I'm gonna keep pushing out videos, hopefully once a week going forward now. I'm still parsing things out in terms of like the cadence, but don't worry, it will pick up. Things will become more regular. Have a good week, everyone, and I'll see you in the next episode.